Now, Fernando Alonso was driving brilliantly all weekend, and Alpine were really quick. He gets himself into that position by doing that superb move we just saw with Pierre Gasly, and he builds up a little bit of a buffer to Perez and Valtteri Bottas. Now, this one was kind of decided by tyres. We didn't know it early on. This was the first ever Formula One race in Qatar, but tyres ended up deciding this great battle for the podium. So here we have a pace graph of Fernando Alonso in the blue, Valtteri Bottas in the turquoise, and Sergio Perez in the dark blue. Now you can see early on, this is the buffer that Alonso gains by passing Gasly and getting himself clear of Perez, who qualified poorly, and Bottas, who started poorly. But Perez is closing in before the pit stops, and he goes and jumps in very early to this point here. Alonso covers him 4 laps later, and it's perfectly executed by Alpine. They cover off Sergio Perez, and he's looking good at this stage. But what Bottas does in the Mercedes is something very different. He has a bit of a deficit coming into to the pit stop phase. You can see here the turquoise colour of Bottas is a long way adrift, and that's because he struggled to make big progress early on. He was stuck in behind Lance Stroll and Yuki Tsunoda. So Bottas loses a lot of ground, but then everyone pits ahead, and he can keep going. And he goes up to lap 30 and beyond. So we're getting into this window, and what Mercedes were trying to do here was fairly clear, I think. Bottas ends up getting a puncture, and he's on lap 33 of a medium tyre. Now this, in hindsight, looks very bold to try and get a medium tyre to lap 33, but his pace was really good, and you can see that from the graph as well. He's still ticking along nicely. And what Mercedes are trying to do here is to try and basically overcut Fernando Alonso. So where he actually had a puncture is in the solid line. The dotted line here is what would have happened if he just pitted the lap before, which in hindsight was obviously the right thing to do. But you can see the dotted line comes out just behind Fernando Alonso, and that's what Mercedes were trying to avoid. What they wanted to do was the black dotted line, pit even 1 lap later, and that would have meant that he comes out ahead of Fernando Alonso. So that's what Mercedes were aiming for. But of course, it was too far for the medium tyres, and the tyres were absolutely on the limit in Qatar, full stop. But this was the first sign that we had of tyres actually failing, and it was the front left that was punctured for Bottas. There was never a chance for teams to work out exactly the lap that the tyre would fail. And basically Bottas was a bit of a guinea pig here. The pace was good. Normally when the tyres are degrading, your pace is so bad that you come in for a new set anyway. But the pace was actually good here. It was just a matter of actually wearing down the front left on a really fast clockwise circuit. So always the load is on the outside front. And that's why that front left became basically more worn, meant that it was a bit weaker. And when they run the curbs, especially some of the sharper curbs on the outside, more prone to some damage. And that's what Pirelli think did for not only Bottas's tyres, but also more tyres later on. So that explains what happened to Bottas.
I have a puncture.
That puncture basically ruined the entire race. He carried on, but then there was damage further, and he went into retirement. And it left us with just a situation now of Perez v Fernando Alonso. And you can see on this one already, Checo made a decent pass on Fernando. He had good pace in the Red Bull. Red Bull and Mercedes were really in a different league to Alpine, but Red Bull pitted much earlier than Alpine at this phase. So Perez is on more marginal tyres at the end of the race, and that is what meant that he had to make a second pit stop. So then this is the race now just between Perez and Alonso. Bottas is out of the race in the dotted line, and we've got this fight now coming between Perez and Alonso, the same colours. But Perez takes another pit stop. So this second stop was a bit precautionary at this stage from Red Bull. Initially, Checo was on the radio saying, "I don't know why we've done that." They were 6 seconds ahead of Alonso. The gap was similar, if not slightly widening. But Red Bull couldn't afford to have a Bottas-like puncture. And actually, a few laps later, when there was punctures for both Williams cars, for Lando Norris, it looked like a decent decision. And if there wasn't a virtual safety car at the end, this is what simulations say would have happened. Perez was charging up to the back of Alonso. Alonso was having to be super cautious on a really old set of hard tyres, and they would have been finishing neck and neck. As it was 3 seconds difference. Perez was between 1 and 2 seconds a lap quicker, 2 laps under virtual safety car, and it would have been really marginal between the two. The virtual safety car really helped out Fernando Alonso. Meant that he could at least make it to the end of the race, but certainly keep that third position.
Yes!
Yes, get in there, you beauty.
Hey, ole, ole.
Ole, 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 ole.
Awesome job, mate. Well managed, well managed.
And we can see here how marginal the tyres were for most of that front pack then. So the failed tyres are on Lando Norris's car just there, the Williams is just there. So you can see, actually, Norris is unlucky. His tyres failed from 4th place pretty early on in its tyre life, lap 23 for Lando. But everyone else in this position, you've got Alonso, Stroll, Ocon, Sainz, Leclerc, Ricciardo, going really marginal and right up to the edge of where both Williams punctured, lap 31 and 32 respectively. They had to go further than that. But these orange laps under virtual safety car meant that the tyres could have a much easier life, and it helped out all of these guys to get to the end. Now, why did Perez pit? Was it the right decision or was it not? Had Perez not taken this set of medium tyres, he would have had an awfully long way to go on the end, on the hards. I don't know whether he would have made it, but you can understand why Red Bull were cautious, because the tyres looked like anything more than about 31, 32 laps on the hards was going to be really tricky. It's what caught Bottas out early on the mediums, and both Williams went on the hards as well. Norris, the outlier, having a puncture so early on, and he was particularly frustrated. So what can you do at the wheel to try and help your tyres out? It's really tricky when you're in these conditions of having front tyre issues. The only thing to do is to go much slower through your right-hand apexes. And it's always, as I said, the outside front that's loaded up, and that's the one that's wearing and your limiting factor. So you've got to just go slower through the apexes, and you've got to take less curb as well, because the curbs, I think, were the critical part in the tyres puncturing as well. The fast corners were wearing them, the curbs were adding to the stress and maybe ultimately puncturing them. So here we have the data trace of Fernando Alonso on the final lap in the red and an earlier lap on the hard tyres in the blue. And you can see the differences that he's doing from the driving. Now, he could be super cautious at this point. He had just 1 lap to go. He's in 3rd position. But you can see this area here, the triple right-hander, and look in the red at the final lap compared to the blue the laps before. He's really putting no stress through the tyres at all. Big lifts on the throttle through 12, through 13. 14, he's approaching much slower. And again, these right-handers here, turns 4 and 5, really taking it easy. All of the right-handers, Alonso is pretty slow. The faster the corner, the slower you have to be as well. And at this point, he's just nursing it to the end. But the only way to do it is to just reduce your pace, take off the load from the outside front, stay off the curbs. It all makes you slower, but with the virtual safety car, he had a bit of a buffer and he could afford to do this. It was a brilliant podium for Fernando and Alpine. Well, that was a look at the battle for the podium, but there was plenty of other action through the weekend as well. Yellow flag penalties on the Saturday. A good start from Max Verstappen to launch him into possible race-winning contention. There's plenty more on that on F1 TV.